For instance, this is a particularly unique problem with blast balls. As I've written about in my management action, and I've been very clear about this, I think, that this device has its uses. It can be effective in certain situations, but it has its limitations. A couple of them are, first of all, if it is detonated, and it has two-stage detonation, if it goes off close to a human being, it can cause injury to that person. It just clearly can. It has, and it can, and it will, if it goes off in close proximity to a human being. And the other this causes the problem. When a blast ball leaves the officer's hand who deploys it, whether they're rolling it or tossing it, once it leaves that officer's hand, the officer has no control over where it goes and can't really aim it because of the fact that it's not completely round. It's not like rolling a bocce ball, right? It's not like firing a projectile that has accuracy involved in it. It's a spherical device that has on the top of it its detonation trigger, and as it's rolling on the ground, it's going every which way because of the oddity of how it's shaped. Once it has its initial detonation, the primer goes off, and then it goes a different way. And so an officer may intend to roll it here, and by the time it detonates, it's over there. And so that causes problems for the people by whom it detonates that maybe weren't doing anything wrong. You didn't need to have that thing go off of them. It causes problems for the police department in terms of liability and accountability, and it causes problems for OPA. And the problem we have is we know who deployed blast balls at a given intersection at a given time, but we can't trace a blast ball that exploded to a specific officer, typically because there are multiple officers there. And so we're left, and I know it's very dissatisfying to complainants, but we're left with the problem of saying, yeah, we had 3 officers in the space of this time who deployed these blast balls, and we can make a guess at whose blast ball it was that went where it shouldn't have gone, but we can't be sure. At least I don't feel I can be sure enough to then say it's a disciplinary matter against that individual officer. Or am I going to recommend the chief hold an officer accountable for a blast ball going in a place he didn't intend it or she didn't intend it to go because it rolled a different way? What I'm trying to tell you is it's an inherent problem with that particular device, right? The individual accountability that the public rightly demands is proving to be very difficult. And layer on top of that the fact that OPA doesn't have the resources to have people out for us to be capturing our own video and other evidence of this, for us to immediately jump in and do investigations of these large-scale events. We wait sometimes 3 or 4 months. In the case of May Day 2016, we waited almost 5 months for the police department to finish all of their force investigations of that event before we had really good access to all of that and could continue or start ours. So I'm just saying this is a problem that's bedeviled us. I'm very frustrated by it. I know complainants and members of the public are frustrated by it. I don't know the answer to it, but it certainly won't be the last time that people in Seattle are concerned about the use of force at large-scale public events.
Mm-hmm.
Pierce, let me ask you, we had public testimony today that maybe for all the reasons you just gave, you were unable to identify a particular officer who had used a blast ball device, but the citizen testified that he was able to identify. Do you have any comment about that particular case?
Well, I won't comment on a particular case. I don't think probably this is the right forum, but I will say, I will just point back to my earlier comment that being convinced that you can identify somebody and having the evidence to prove it are sometimes two very different things. I feel I have I'm duty bound to establish at the base level on a preponderance of the evidence that it's more likely than not that this particular individual was responsible for that particular act and that the act was in violation of the policy. And people can disagree. So if a member of the public says, well, I think there's enough evidence to prove it, I'm not going to argue with him. That's his belief. How can I counter that? The fact is, if I'm not convinced, I'm not convinced, and no amount of pressure or complaining about that's going to change my mind. I'm not going to do something I don't think the evidence is there to do. So,
Pierce, around the large-scale events, without getting, I don't want to get